Hi, everybody. My name is Kim Martin. I am a member here at Sidebar. Sidebar is a leadership organization that is invitation and also interview entrance. At the same time, that doesn't mean it's that exclusive in the sense that we want to exclude anybody. We really just want to bring in we just want to bring in leaders and senior executives that come in with the same shared values that we do: generosity, transparency, honesty, trust, growth orientation. We're on a mission to unleash the potential of everyone within our community. Specifically, our leadership program is designed around driving measurable results across a member's entire professional journey, with everything delivered through a custom built platform that is digitally enabled and across multiple channels. If you have more interest in talking to us, please let me know, and you can always get in touch with us as well. And it is my pleasure to introduce to you our speaker, Ron Yang. He is the founder of MySecond AI, a product management operating system that has been built from Claude. He was previously the VP of product at AHA and has been a product advisor to over 25 different organizations, SaaS organizations specifically. Ron has built and run his own PM operating system for product teams, turning scattered AI usage into structured, repeatable workflows that the whole team can run and utilize. Ron, if there's anything else that you want to add or enhance, please let me know, but it's yours.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kim, and appreciate everyone being here today. Excited to dive into product management operating systems. I'm going to talk a little bit more about, what they are, what they're used for, some of the problems that people have been running into it, and also kind of share a little bit more around a team rollout and what that looks like. Going to be me talking through some slides over the course of a little bit of time, but also share a little bit of a demo too, so that there will be some show and tell today as well. All right, so let's dive on in. This big number right here is how much money your team may be wasting simply having conversations with chatbots every single day. And so what I've seen as I've talked to many product orgs is that many product teams, they're just chatting with OpenAI, Chat GPT, and Claude with the idea that they're being productive. But in reality, they're having conversations with Claude and just simply saying, here's my PRD. Can you build something out for me? Giving Claude additional information about the company, their product, their personas, repeating information constantly, and just having all this back and forth. And that's not really the way that you can drive efficiency with Claude or any of these different tools here. And what happens when you do this is that every single time you're having a conversation with AI, you are essentially repeating the same exact thing over and over again. And what that then causes is all this wasted effort and time, across your team. When you run it down the numbers, what you can see is most teams, they have their PMs spending about an hour a day, just re-explaining things to Claude every single time, or ChatGPT in terms of their usage there. You roll this out, you see 5 hours a week, that turns to 20 hours a month, that turns into 240 hours a year. And at a low rate of about $200 an hour, that's over 50K, per product manager simply chatting with AI. And so that's not what we're after here. There's definitely a better way to handle your usage across AI in terms of how you work with it and simply to create a system so that you don't necessarily need to do that every single time. What I've seen with teams is that there are 6 different levels, in terms of your usage of AI, across the product management area. Down here is really where I see most of the teams operating in terms of their usage. They're treating AI as a search bar. They're using it as Google. And so they're going to it, asking for it to go do something. It does it. They explain and kind of continue to refine the search that they're looking for and go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And again, that's not really what AI was meant to do. What you can see across the spectrum is that there's a lot of different ways that you may be able to leverage, the tool. And I'd love to see for folks, as you start to see this and start to think about your own team, feel free to pop it into the chat in terms of where you think your team is right now. I would love to see that and trying to get some thoughts from that end. But there's different ways, that you can leverage AI. And what I am going to share a lot more today is this concept here, around a product management operating system. This is the place, where you start to actually have something that compounds, or you actually have something where AI knows you and understands you and your product and what you're trying to do, rather than, again, every single chat that you have, starting from zero. That's the product management operating system that I've started to build and start to roll out across different organizations, and where I'm starting to see a much, much greater value in terms of what's possible and what can be done, across the team.
Hey,
And
Ron.
so the product management operating system that I've built out consists of these four key pillars here. I'm going to dive into each of them, but essentially it's an AI that knows everything about you and it has that context. It has the skills, and so it has the understanding of how to do different things. It has sub agents, which are different personas who reflect team members, as part of your organization that then help you to build out that work. And then workflows is where you start to chain multiple skills together and multiple sub agents together, to achieve something, across the board a little bit more autonomously as well. So let's dive into each of these and I'll share a little bit more, across each. And so context to me, if you're going to spend anywhere of your time, this is where you probably have to spend the majority of your time. This is the most important area to give Claude, all that information about you. And so if you take that time to actually set this up, you can tell it all about your company. What are you trying to do? What's the revenue model that you have? What are the focus areas that you have in this upcoming year? You gotta have it, you start to build out some product context. You give it some information about the core functionality that you have, the key benefits, the core jobs to be done that you're trying to achieve, who your actual users are of the product as well, what the landscape looks like, and your strategic initiatives, for the upcoming year. And so this is an area that a lot of teams skip over, as they start to build out their operating system or as they're starting to build out AI and their usage. Many folks kind of jump straight into the prompts and start to build out, hey, these are all the things that I want Claude to go build for me. But they're not taking that step back to really think about, what does Claude actually need to understand about me and my team in order to be successful? Another way that you might think about this is that, if you had a new product manager who is going to start at your company tomorrow, would you just let that person run wild? Or would you onboard them and give them the information that they need about your company and your product and your personas and who you're trying to reach and the landscape and what your strategic initiatives are to really, truly, be successful? And so that's a little bit of a mindset change, as you start to build out and start to leverage AI. But that's, one model that has helped me, to really refine this and start to think about what makes AI most effective in the use. The skills is the second component that I mentioned to you before. This is probably where a lot of folks, have been spending a lot of effort, over the past year or two, in your usage of AI. Where you've built out some kind of PRD generator, or you have some kind of analysis that you're asking it to do. I've built out over 70 different skills, on my website. You can see the URLs down here. These are all free. You feel free to grab any of them, download them, start to check them out and use them. But it truly essentially covers all the different workflows, from a product management lens, and starts to build out some of the key prompts that you need and skills, and so that Claude not only understands what you're trying to do, but it also understands what's the output and the format, that you want this to then be. And so what you start to able to do here is that you can give very brief information about what you're trying to do. Claude will then go look at the context about everything about you. It'll run that skill and then provide the output. And there's no more of this chatting back and forth and going back and forth for an hour to re-explain everything about you. It already has that inside and already understands, all about you. The subagents are another key aspect here. For me, this is actually the area of Claude that I use the most within my own usage of the PMOS. But what you can essentially create are different people, that may reflect folks within your organization. And so you can create a CTO subagent within your environment who might actually reflect the CTO in your organization. It might reflect the common questions, that person asks your team, when you have different priorities on board. There may be different areas that they typically push back on or question about or want to kind of dig deeper on. And so you can set up these different personas here, to really get that in place so that you can do these things
ಒಂದು ಫೋನ್ನ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್
before it
ಇರ್ತಾನೆ
actually
ಅವನಿಗೆ
goes.
ಒಂದೊಂದು ಇದು ಇರ್ತಾನಲ್ಲ ಒ ಪಿ ಟಿ 3 ವರ್ಷ ಇರ್ತಾನಲ್ಲ
think we got some little background noise. Just can folks
Mostly
just make
Google
sure
மாதிரி
they're all on mute?
முடிச்சிருக்கீங்க இல்லைன்னு தெரியல. ஏப்ரல் 24 ஆகஸ்ட் 24ல முடிச்சிருக்கான். 25, 26, 27னா
Thank you. Okay, and then the last pillar are workflows. And so this is super exciting. I'm going to show this in just a little bit so that you can see a live demo of what this looks like within Claude. But this is when you start to bring in multiple skills together and run them at the same time. So you can run these so that it runs multiple skills and they're all chained together. You can even have parallel skills. And so I mentioned the sub agents a second ago. You can have imagine having a PRD review and having, all six of those sub agents that I just showed you here, doing a review, of the work that you just put together at the same time. So there's lots of different use cases in terms of what you're able to do here, as you start to build this out. So let me kind of take a step back. And I've shared a little bit around just the context and high level of what a product management operating system is and what it's all about. But obviously, seeing is always better than hearing. And so I'm going to share this in just a moment. And we're going to walk through a little bit of an example in terms of what this might look like. But let me set the stage a little bit first so that you understand, what we're about to do here. So imagine this use case. You're a product lead at an organization. The demo company that I'm going to share is a company called Vetly. They are basically a vet management tool. Imagine you are bringing your pet to the vet, and there's a person at the front desk. This is the software that person uses to manage all of the different things, the patients that they have at the organization, all the appointments, the insurance, the billing, all the different things that person might handle. And then there's different interfaces for the veterinarians to then, manage the patients that they have as well. And so you get this question from your CEO who that asks, okay, you've spent the past month, doing all this work and doing all this research. Tell me what we need to do here. And this is what all the research that your team just did. Tons of customer interviews. You got all these support notes, from the different calls. There's sales calls notes, and there's all these different data points that you might have. But it's hard to really distinguish and understand, what are you supposed to do here, based on all this information that you might have. So let me switch over, and I'm going to show a couple things before I dive into Claude. And so what I want to first show is some of the context files. And so I mentioned context being, one of the most important things here. And so you can see this context folder here that I have, and there are different files here. These are the different context files that I mentioned just a moment ago. There's your company, your competitors, goals, personas, and product. And won't go into all the detail of each of them, but you can just get a sampling here, in terms of some of the information that might sit, within here for this company file. It helps understanding of the company. You can see the different goals and that the organization is trying to achieve. So it has that strategic context in terms of what you're trying to do. And a little bit about the product set too, in terms of some of the key capabilities that exist in the product right now and, what that enables your customers to do as well. So I mentioned before that there's all this research, that you and your team just went through. And so let me show you a summary of that and what that might look like. And so there's an input folder that I have within this operating system that is ingesting all this information. And so you can see that one of the customers that they have, Dr. Sarah Chen, had this customer support request here. And there's an email here. There's transcripts. And so different Zoom calls here, you can see the transcripts from a user interview that they had. And, all the different notes here. There's a few of these as well. There's sales call notes, from the team that they've taken. These is automated in terms of the calls that they've had. And then your Zendesk pull down, in terms of all the different support tickets and some of the understanding here. And so a ton of information here, right? Just in terms of, what's actually has come through. Before AI, your team and yourself, you probably scan through, this information. You might not necessarily be able to go through it all because it's just too much information to really comprehend and understand, without actually having to go through it on your own. But obviously AI is like one of the great things that it can do is that it can take tons of information and just distill it down in terms of, some of the key understanding there. So I'm going to show a couple of things, but right before this call, I ran a workflow called the voice of customer analysis, where it took all of its information. It was a super simple, straightforward prompt where I just said, voice of customer analysis, and I take a look at some of the information in the input folder and provide a summary. And that was all I provided to it. And what you can see here is the exact summary. And again, I'll scan through this in just a moment, but you can see high level, okay, these are some of the key themes that I see across all these different areas. So it went through over 1,000 different pieces of information here. It started to outline some of the key themes around AI SOAP notes. So you're a veterinarian, you're sitting in this patient visit, and the patient's telling you all about everything that happened. And so they're mentioning that, like some of the features here are just like not as strong as it could be. They're wanting some improvements to their online booking, as client portal adoption. So there's all these different themes, that are starting to come through here and starting to prioritize the different pain points. Again, based on everything that you've given it, around your priorities, the goals that you have, the key personas that you have as well, and even giving you a sentiment analysis that you have to here. So this was one workflow that I had just run, earlier today. I'm going to switch over to Claude and start to kind of build out the next workflow to share with you.
Before we do that, Ron, we do have a question from Kevin that was also upvoted. Have you tested this with other integrations like Salesforce instead of passing the feedback into a Markdown file?
Yep. Yeah. So there's different MCPs that you can set up. There's multiple ways that you can set up integrations. MCPs is definitely one of them that's fairly straightforward. I see the note around tokens. MCPs do take up a lot of tokens. So that is one downside of it. But they are pretty straightforward to set up, where you can ingest information and then analyze this, right from the get-go. There's also different ways that you can set up some API skills to then get this information as well. But lots of different ways to do read and write, in terms of the different tools out there to make sure that this fits in the broader use of all the tools that you have. Okay, so let me switch over for just a second and just go to Cloud. And so very simple. What I want to do is I want to take one of the problems that I just showed you in Cursor in terms of the file just a second ago, and have it go start to build out a PRD, based on it. And so what I'm going to say is go from problem to PRD. So what you might be able to see here is that, okay, it goes from problem statement to an actually engineering ready, PRD here. Okay, PRD AI SOAP notes issue noted in the voice customer analysis. Okay, so I'm going to let this run and I'm going to come back to it in just a moment. But what you'll see in just a second is that what it's going to start to do is start to look at the different files here. So it's reading the workflow that I mentioned. It's starting to go through and see the different context files that we have here too. And so again, this is the key context area so that I don't need to go and repeat all these different things about myself and the company and all, but it's actually going to go run this as well. So I'm going to put this in auto mode. I feel safe about it. And then I'm going to go back to the presentation, and then we'll come back to this in just a moment after it runs. It'll probably take about a couple minutes or so. Preeti asks, is this the base model for Claude or paid? It's definitely the paid one. And so I probably spend a little bit too much money on Claude and Anthropic. They're happy about that, but I see a lot of benefit from it, for sure. But it's definitely worth it, as you start to see the efficiency gains. I mean, I threw out that 250K stat. Obviously, it's, might not be exact in terms of the numbers, but it's far worth it, in terms of, the value that you get, from AI in terms of the usage here. Okay, so what you're going to see in just a little bit is that basically I ran the first part one, of this all just a moment ago, where it's actually kind of identifying some of the key themes, and that was that voice of customer analysis. And the next key area that it's all that I'm going to start to run is this PRD ready output, in terms of, what's in place here. And so as this runs, let's see, start to pull it up here. And so what it's already done here, and I'll just kind of
Would it be
share it in a
possible for
moment.
the host to come in and mute whoever is the other person who is noisy? I can't hear you probably. Sorry.
Unfortunately, I don't have that access right now, so I am working on this. Thank
Oh,
you so
got it.
much.
Sorry. Thank
Thank you. Okay. So this workflow that I mentioned, with this PRD generation, it's going through a few different things here. It's going to put together a jobs to be done analysis. It's going to create an opportunity tree and a few more additional areas here. You can even start to see, some of the analysis here. And so again, the beauty of this is that it knows all the different capabilities here in terms of what I'm trying to do. And so it's going to run this on its own, and I'm not going to have to go and repeat, everything that we've done over time here. And so let me just kind of skip for a second here. So we'll come back over here as it starts to build out, and so that you can see some of the different capabilities here. All right. So what you'll see in just a moment, as it starts to get done, is that it'll probably take about 5 to 10 minutes here. But what's critical here is that it knows everything about me once again, and so that it can start to synthesize and get this information in place and start to really construct some of the best practices here around product to really help me to figure out, where I need to prioritize my time and how do I get the entire team unlocked here. I think one of the best parts about getting all these skills in place is that product managers now will have the time to actually do things in the so-called right way, in terms of product management. And so you've got all these best practices that you've been told over the years in terms of what you should be doing and identifying jobs to be done and setting up your opportunity trees and really getting things all specced out in the right way. But what's hard about that is that it's hard to remember, all those different things on the fly, especially when you have all these different things going on. And so what's beautiful is that you can really codify this in the different skills that you have so that every single time that you run this, that you have this in place so that you don't necessarily have to try and remember, what you're trying to do, every single time here. So just go back for just a second here. So what you can see is it started to run all this together. And in a very short amount of time here, it started to really build this out. And so you can see there's a single spec. It ran all the jobs to be done around the analysis. It figured out the key opportunities for you. It's got a PRD, and then it's got the user stories broken down, in place for you as well. Again, from a very, very short amount of time, very little back and forth for me, because again, I took that time to set things up so that it has all the information it needed and understood what it needed to do so that we could then really start to drive forward in terms of this.
Just for a pause, Ron, we've got a few questions that came up from AB, Ayesha, and Greg. AB, do you want to, well, it's a simple question. To test the water, would you recommend using a pro subscription or would the max sub be required?
If you're just testing the waters, I would probably start with pro just to kind of so that you can get a handle of it. It's like $20 a month just to kind of see what that looks like. What you will probably see is that you're going to hit your tokens pretty fast and you're going to need to go to the next phase. But again, if you're wanting to just spend a small amount just to kind of see what this feels like and what it looks like, I think that's a fine starting point.
And I'll ask Greg's question next. It seems to be a bit of an enhancement to the one that you just answered. What type of savings are had in terms of tokens by using this PM operating system versus the context sprawl of interactive AI chatbots?
The context. So I couldn't tell you, Greg, just from like the direct numbers, in terms of it. But what I will say is that from a token perspective, a lot of the skills that I've set up here, I've set them up to point to different models based on what the task at hand. And so there are some tasks that are in place that are are a lot more complex, and they're going to need an opus or a smarter model in terms of what it's doing. But then there are other ones that are really just kind of focusing on some data where it's not really going to require as much thinking power in terms of what it does, and so it might be okay without a haiku or a sonnet. And so that's one of the key benefits here is that you can direct it to different places to just ensure that you're allocating the tokens in the right kind of way. But it's yeah, what I'd say is that the organization, of the context files is important here in that you want it to go to a single place, that where it captures all that information, versus having to bounce around to all these different areas and try to find the different files and information that you need. That's when you start to see the token use really start to explode.
Great. And are we able to?
Real quick follow up on that. Thanks so much. So are you saying in those Claude, the skills, you're actually determining which model you're going to use, and that's how you control some of the token burn?
Yeah. So in the skills itself, I'm having it go refer to specific models based on the usage there, and based on the task that it's trying to achieve. That's something that you can customize in terms of the usage of it as well. But that's the base in terms of what we're suggesting.
Wonderful. And Ron, correct me if I'm wrong, but you are planning on sharing a copy of the deck that you have been presenting as well.
Yes.
Wonderful. And for those of you that are asking about the prompts that Ron has been sharing, yes, he did share a slide within his presentation that helps you narrow in on where to go on his website to get the 70 plus free prompts that will enable you to be able to do some of this on your own. And the website address, all of that is provided within the presentation. So for those of you asking about prompts, the presentation, it will be available all in one.
Thanks, good. All right, I'm going to keep on going, and then I think we'll have some time towards the end for additional questions. John, we just want to make sure that we hit upon everything. There's probably too many slides in terms of what I want to share, but got a lot to say. All right, so last bit, just in terms of the product management operating system itself, is that if there's anything that you remember, this is probably the three most important things here. Set up the context. This is one of the most critical pieces here. Again, I've said it a few times and I'm going to keep repeating myself on it. But if you're not going to spend the time to set up the context here, the rest of the skills in terms of everything you're doing are not going to be as valuable. The skills in place, it'll essentially be just like a prompt, that you're pasting into the chat. And you're going to be focused on that level 1, level 2 area in terms of the maturity curve that I shared. The skills are definitely a high value, once you do set up that context, because it's not only setting the framing, for the information that you're giving it, the output that you're receiving it. There's the model direction that I mentioned, a lot of different things here, in terms of what you're able to do. Just in terms of the amount of lines that you might see in a typical SIL, that there's probably hundreds of lines of information, in one of these skills that are generated. Versus a prompt, that someone may be sharing in your organization and be far less. And so it's just a level of clarity, that you're getting to the system. And then finally, it's just a reframe, in terms of how you start to think about your usage of these different tools. Is that OpenAI might have done a disservice in terms of their initial naming, but don't treat it like chat. That's not what you're trying to do here. What you really need is a true system in place. So last kind of bit that I'm going to share, just some high level. So I talked a lot about creating a product management operating system, a personal one, for yourself, which is all great and fine, in terms of what you're doing, and it really can start to maximize, where you're going, with the system as well. But where you start to get the true value is when you start to roll this out to the entire team. And so this is two key bits of information that are critical, in terms of a rollout for the team. One, obviously, is the system, that we've talked about and getting that technology in place. But then the part that people forget with AI, because it's all the robots and machines, it's the people. This is probably one of the harder parts of really getting this in place and ensuring, that you can really get something that sticks here. So let's quickly talk about the people. And so if you can't get the people on board, it's not really going to do anything. And so what I've often seen, within the organization is that you need a champion. And, for some of you who may be product leaders in your organization, that might be you. It might also be, other folks within the company, within your team who may be a little bit more AI forward, in terms of what they've been doing. And so my recommendation here is, talk to the team, get them experimenting, identify, who is that person, who is leading the charge, within your organization from an AI front. It may be that person who is creating some skills or creating prompts and sharing them, across the organization or as well already. You want to start to identify and find those people within your team to start to see, like how can we start to really build this up from a bottom-up perspective. As you start to get this in place, and again, this may be a little bit further down the curve for some of the folks who are just getting started here, but as you start to use this, there is a little bit of maintenance, in terms of the operating system. It's not going to be something that just kind of, runs by itself. You do need to make sure that the context that you have, stays fresh, that the skills that your team continues to evolve and use, get improved over time, that you're refreshing information. And so again, like, don't treat this like a one-time thing. It's something that you need to continue to refine and improve over time to just ensure, that you are getting the most value of it. If you do spend that time, what you'll see is that day 30 of using a product management operating system will be exponentially better than day 1. But it's a matter of continuing to refine and build out that system there. On the system front, what's really critical here is really having that single source of truth. And so what I've often seen with some teams that are just getting started here, with an operating system is that they have one product manager who is building out the operating system, and then they have another one building out as well. And what starts to happen here is that you have multiple systems across the team, as opposed to a single system, that each product manager can then point over to. And so that's one critical component here. Again, as you start to move up the maturity curve in your organization and start to drive usage, make sure that this is a single system that everyone's pointing to, so that, again, you have less of the drift. You don't want, this PM system to be more up to date than this one. You need one that everyone kind of focuses on, and then obviously will, help from that maintenance side that I mentioned as well, as you start to really hone in on this as well. But the beauty of it is that when you do have that single system in place, there's one place where you have all the context files. There's a single repository of the skills that you have. You can have a single source of truth of all the outputs, and every single person on the team will then get access to this, over time as they start to build this out. I said this before already. I've added probably 5 or 6 different places that I could repeat myself on this because it's so important. But the shared context is the critical component. If you skip this, you might as well not be trying to set up that system, because it's not going to be something that actually drives value here. It's an absolute 100% most critical part in terms of getting your system in place. The other tip that I'll give you is that as you start to drive that usage across the team, I mentioned the people is one of the key important pieces here. It's going to be hard. Like, imagine any process that you're starting to implement, across your organization. It's going to be hard to kind of just lift the table up and revamp everything, right from the get-go. My recommendation here is identify, one painful workflow that the team might have today. Focus on that, drive the improvement, have everyone see and understand the value of it. And then when you start to get that ingrained, start to then move on to the next one as well. It's really the change adoption piece of getting AI into the organization is one that people often forget, but it's really a critical one, in terms of that setup. Okay, so kind of as I start to wrap up here, what I want to call out is, again, the 4 pillars. This is the operating system critical component here to set up these 4 different areas. Don't have to do all the different things and all different workflows at once in terms of driving that change adoption, but getting these 4 components here will prove high value to you, as you start to build out your product management system, across the board there. What I want to leave you with are a couple bits here. So I mentioned that we kind of talked about this earlier today. I think there are some links floating around the chat. I do have a number of skills that are available, on the website, and you can feel free to go check that out, download them at any point. I work with a number of organizations in terms of actually building out this custom operating system for them and rolling it out and training the team. And so if that's something that may be useful to you, feel free to check that out and see a bit more. The last bit that I want to mention that I am working on, this is coming out pretty soon, is that we will be rolling out software, for this. And so there will be an opportunity for you to use MySecond to not only build out your PMOS that is completely customized to your organization, but that you can also then roll it out to your team as well. And so this is coming soon. I've got a QR code here for an early access program. And so if anyone is interested in that, feel free, and I hope to see you on the other side on that front. And with that, I'm going to wrap up for today on my end. And definitely appreciate everyone being here and some of the questions already. I think we probably have some more time for questions, but Kim, I'll kind of let you take it from here in terms of how you want to roll out.
Amazing. Ron, it definitely seems like there's a lot of fans based upon all the applause that I'm seeing. So I do understand, as I'm reading through some of these questions, there was a lot of questions around the cost associated with which subscription that Ron is using. Forgive me, I'm not dismissing those, but there's meatier and perhaps more meaningful questions that Ron can answer on the call today. And Ron, I understand that people can also get in touch with you if they want to have perhaps more specific, very tactical questions. So let me get to it. One is, want to make sure that we get our survey out, and I'll do that in a minute. But Ian, you had a question, and if you don't mind coming off of mute, could you ask that question regarding gotchas around orchestration that you wanted to ask Ron? And then Ron, if you can hand over presenter rights to me, I'd be really appreciative.
Yes.
Hi, Ron. Really appreciate you sharing all this. It's good. It's great stuff. Orchestration, obviously the hard part, right? I think I asked this question before you got to your team part. Any tips or gotchas or best practices you can think about, what tools to look at? I'm just even thinking like, is this like a simple drive folder that everybody uses? Is that the cheapest way to do that? Or are you using something like Git when you advise people on how to scale this thing? How to think about that space would be great. Thanks.
Yep. Great question, Ian. And so for folks who might not like fully kind of see where Ian's going, he's kind of focused on the team side. And it's like, how do you kind of get this to a place that then, the entire team can leverage and utilize? And so I've looked at a few different solutions here, and I'll kind of share where I'm landing, with it, Ian, and kind of share like the different options, that you might have. So I mentioned the shared system, is something that's critical here. You can't have, every single PM having their local system on their computer. That's not going to scale. You're going to have issues here, around the management, the context, and all the skills, that are in place. And so you do need this shared repository. I've looked at a couple ways of doing this, and I'll share kind of like where I'm landing with it. Google Drive, or any like Dropbox, any of those tools, can be a way to do that, where you have something. It's kind of the budget way of doing it, I would say, because you don't have the access to the actual markdown files. It's all kind of just like regular files there. And so it makes it a little bit harder, to manage, from that end. GitHub is another one that some teams have used as well. It's a very strong system. Obviously, like code is really what it's meant for, but it has, what you're able to do with GitHub is set up that search system. So it's definitely possible to do so. A lot of teams that I've spoken to is that it's a little bit too heavyweight, in terms of all the capabilities, and it's hard to not only learn the PMOS, but then to learn a brand new tool. Has been something that's challenging as well. The third bit, and probably no surprise, with MySecond, that's what we're building out right now. And so there is a shared layer in terms of what you then can manage and have a single system to manage all the different areas, and that's that waitlist that I mentioned to you with the early access program.
Like a true product person, Ron, you see a problem and you figure, why not include that in the solution to make it more seamless and easy, right?
That's right.
Before we get to Randir's question, I just want to ask everybody to please take a moment as you're listening to all the Q&A. Here at Sidebar, we value and appreciate all the feedback regarding the sessions that we do, specifically Ron's session. Your survey responses will come to Sidebar and also be shared with Ron in order for us to continuously learn and improve so that our content is providing the greatest value for your time and your attention. Please take a moment, respond, let us know what you think. In addition to the QR code, I have just also included a link for the survey within the chat. So thank you so much in advance for your responses. And Randir, if you're still on, could you come off of mute and share a little bit more about your question?
Yeah, Ron, thanks. That was super helpful seeing what you built and also the how. So thanks for making the skills available. I liked your concept of making sure that we are consistent even in our own approach. And even as you were saying that, I realized I'm guilty of being sporadic with whatever framework I use, whether it's PRFAQ or opportunity solution tree or whatever. And I can certainly see the value of being consistent in that approach. Also had a question on the opportunity solution tree piece, specifically on the solution part of it, which is how is the system coming up with potential solutions? Is it making up potential solutions to the opportunity? Is it identified through the voice of the customer, or is it picking up solutions from voice of the customer and putting it there? I was just curious about that part. Thanks.
Yep, for sure. So that workflow that you mentioned, it's like one of 70 different skills that we have. So I kind of share what I recall some of the bits there and then kind of fill in some of the gaps. But yeah, so first off, opportunity solution tree, if you're not familiar, Teresa Torres, a great framework that she has put together. And it's largely based on, a lot of the thought leadership that she has, on that front. But yes, it's taking, again, all the context. So it's taking all the information about what your company does, what your product does, and like where you're trying to go, as a starting point. It's taking a look at all the analysis. And so the voice of customer analysis that you just ran and starting to identify the key areas of feedback. And then it starts to build out some of the jobs to be done as well. And so it's like taking all those different bits there to then start to dive in and see, what that might look like. I'm just going to pull it up on the website now, and I'll drop a link so that you can see there's a little bit more information there on that specific workflow, Randir, so that you can then see some of the more of the details that I may be missing as well. So I'll just
So it is coming up with the solutions based on all the context, voice of customer, basically any of the stuff that you have fed it, and trying to project what might be a good solution here. Okay, thanks.
That's right.
Wonderful. And Carrie Ann, if I say your name correctly, it sounds like you've got a question here as well.
Yeah. Just from the demo you showed us, this is actually aligned with the direction that our team is thinking about going in. So seeing a lot that makes a ton of sense, but was curious about what you've seen or heard from teams that are a little bit more complex in nature, especially, seeing you had some research files in there and thinking about the volume of research our team has. We have different teams running it. How might we think about separating out these work streams and structuring it to A, manage context so we're not blowing up the context window, B, keep our teams sane so they're not fighting over who manages what, etc. So would love your thoughts there.
Yeah, great question, Karianne. And I'm glancing at your comment that you made in the chat as well, so I can see a little bit more of the information there. So it sounds like the organization, I'm assuming, larger team, multiple products in the portfolio, lots of different personas that you may be treating as well. And so yes, I don't know the company, but it definitely sounds familiar, in terms of what you're trying to do there. And so if I kind of just go back to what I showed, it was a pretty simple example, of one product company. They have a set of personas. There's a competitive landscape for that one product and goals, mapping to that. For a multi-product type of portfolio, some of the gotchas and watch outs that you need to be sure of is that, why don't we take Zoom, as an example. And so Zoom, there's obviously the meeting rooms, that we have right now. I think that they also have phones, there's webinars, there's all these different features, that they might have. And so what you do need to start to create are the product MD files, for each of the different products, that you have. The competitive landscape is probably different. And so you're going to need different ones, for that as well. And same for personas. The company one can probably stay at that top level so that you don't necessarily need to create new ones there. But the key is that the product team focused on Zoom meetings has their own set of files that may be different from the team that is focused on webinars or phone or whatever it may be. And what that then leads to is basically a different folder structure, so that you can have the context files that people are accessing and that it's pointing to the right places, at the right time for what they're needing there. So it's a little bit more of a complex setup there, but yes, like I think the key here is just make sure that team A isn't trying to use the context files, that team B is using, because then you're going to have to read about 30 different files to then run a single skill. And that's not really, what we're after here.
For sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Greg, it looks like you have a question or two and you want to come off mute to ask them.
Yeah. Hey, Ron, this is really, really great. This is completely on brand. I think I speak for everybody here. We've all been thinking about this in some way or another, but you've done the great job of doing some of the heavy lifting at first. One of the things as a product leader that I like to think about, or in this context, is, and I know you've kind of talked about sub teams in the last section, but what about kind of like product operations in general? Like thinking horizontally across organizations in terms of generalized product or operations, and kind of from a product leadership standpoint, if I have a purview over a lot of different teams, just as say, with like OKRs, you might not want to do OKRs that can collapse into other OKRs. That's like a bad practice. Is there any kind of practices that you've seen as it relates to this when dealing with product operations across a larger team, or you have a squad pod kind of formation? Love to kind of get your get into the nitty gritty when it comes to larger organizations and dealing with this. But thanks so much in advance.
Yep. Greg, can you share? So is it a little bit of a different setup to what you're asking with Carrie Ann? Like, can you share a little bit more about like what you're looking for? Just so I want to make sure I understand it. And
I'm trying to find out, just as you gave particular gotchas as it relates to I can't remember what was the last thing we were just talking about. Hold on a second here. Into multi-portfolio. Okay. Yeah. Let's say from a top-down perspective, you're a CPO, okay, and you want to try to introduce these type of things. Is there something in terms of both product management and people management as it relates to product from a product operations standpoint that you've thought about here? I know you have the 70 plus skills. Are some of them more people oriented, not just product oriented in terms of management? Would love to get your ideas on this.
I see. Got it. Okay. I appreciate the additional context there, Greg. And I think one first thing, as I start to think about this operating system as a whole, many teams don't have the luxury of product ops in their organization. I've wrote about this once. I've actually never been part of an org, where the CEO gave me that luxury, from a product ops perspective. So if you have that, you're very lucky. But I think, the operating system here is something that I see as the opportunity to have that. And so I see this as being, that product ops layer, for your organization, in terms of what you can have here. And so I think that's like one first thing, that I'll call out. The second thing, I think that what you're describing here, there's a lot of differentiation here of the skills around, some of the key jobs to be done, from a product management perspective. And that's things like, your product discovery that you do, the strategy, PRDs, launch prep, all of some kind of like key areas within that. There are some skills here as well, that are also relating to some of the day-to-day things. And so you might imagine meeting notes, like this one. And so how do you automatically ingest some of the meeting notes that you have here, on a regular cadence? There's different toolings here as well around kind of like managing the system at hand too. And so, how do you keep your context up to date? How do you make sure that you're constantly improving the OS as well? And so there's different layers there, that this also includes, to again, make sure that this isn't like a one-time thing that you set up, but it's something that you continue to feed there. So Greg, hopefully that helps a little bit. I don't know if it completely hits on, all the different areas that you're asking, but, hopefully it might be helpful in terms of a couple of tidbits there.
Greg says thanks. So There's a bit of back and forth going around Julie S's question about Confluence. I'm going to put a pause on that given the time that we've got. If we have some time left over, I'll come back to that. But it looks like Manju, you have a question. Do you mind coming off mute and asking Ron directly?
Hey, Ron, and thank you for a very thorough presentation on that and gave a complete picture as well. But like you said, it is usually the people and the process of making this change that is harder to do. So what are the actual challenges that you faced within your own team as well as in the clients that you worked with also so far in this rollout and also in consistent adoption? Just wanted to understand some
Yeah,
examples are, that's harder. And how did you go about tackling those specific problems or challenges?
right, right. So you always kind of learn by doing, in terms of getting some things in place. And so I'll kind of share, some of the early rollouts, what that looked like and like how I've worked it over time. Um, Training is one area that is probably not focused on enough, in terms of some of these rollouts here. And so many teams think that, all right, we built the system, and now every single product manager, we have a new process that you can now follow, and make sure you follow it. And here's the link, go check it out. And so the training piece is something that I definitely recommend is critical here, as you start to get this in place. Is that, I just shared a little bit today and, about a half hour in terms of this walkthrough, but ensuring that every product manager in your organization understands what are these context files, like what does it actually do? Which skills am I actually supposed to use? What are the use cases for each of these? And how do I customize some of these skills and improve it on my own? Like these are all these different areas here that I think are critical just to help the team understand, what this thing is all about and like why it's important. You're going to have some folks, in the organization that feel like they're happy, with what they have. And so, one story I remember is that I was talking to one of the product leads in a portfolio that I was at about what's your usage like with AI and how's it going? And she was telling me that it was absolutely great and she loved it and they were getting all these efficiencies out of it. And I watched her use Chat GPT, and it was just this going back and forth and asking all these questions, kind of what I was mentioning earlier. And so I think it's really just get to the heart of understanding, where your team is right now, and then get some baby steps, drive that education, and help to show them that there is a better way that they might not be realizing. But you're going to need some of the training and the internal champions that help you to get there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that question, Manju. And it looks like Greg, who might be getting the award for the most engaged participant in today's session, has a side question. Greg, do you want to come off mute and ask as well?
Yeah, sorry. I hate using up all the airtime, but
no apologies. Engagement is.
I literally think about this all day, every day. So my side question is, when utilizing like a PMOS, like you've done here, I'm just going to read my question. What types of ceremonies have you seen disappear from the process? So like, where is product design and dev friction like removed? What types of meetings have you seen disappear when this approach is used properly? I mean, all the time, everybody is in kind of meeting hell, Zoom hell, 8, 16 meetings a day. What ways can we just reclaim that time by using this? Where have you seen, I know you talked about the $250,000 thing, but this other thing, the invaluable thing, the very resource that can't be renewed is time. Where have you seen those type of savings? Very interested in that. Thanks again.
Right. Yep. So a lot of different areas. I'll point out a couple of them, just to kind of share a couple of examples here. And so one, I mentioned the sub-agent reviewers is something that I personally use a lot, that I see a lot of value in. And so one example, that I see that often happens is that imagine you've got some kind of PRD review or kind of roadmap review, with the leadership team that's coming up. And you hate being that PM who goes into that meeting, you think you're ready to go, and then you get asked 5 different questions by all the different stakeholders, and you're just blown up on the spot, and you have no plan, and you got to go back and redo everything. And so that's a meeting that every single PM hates, to have. And so, why not come to that meeting prepared? And so, you can run these different sub-agents to actually get some feedback, from those different personas in your organization. and kind of better prep. It's like, okay, well, my CRO always asks this question, or my CTO always asks this question about it. And like, how do I make sure that I'm hitting upon, all these different areas, ahead of the ball here? And so that instead of having that meeting, I'm already fully prepared. They can read the keynotes in terms of what we're trying to achieve here, so that everyone's on the same page, right from the get-go. And so some of that is just being a matter of kind of getting ahead, in terms of what you're doing, is definitely a key one. And so I think that's one, area to call out. The PRD and user story breakdown is definitely one that I've seen from an engineering perspective, that has been able to accelerate a bit more, especially in an age where, agents are doing a lot more of the code writing, these days. And so that's something that, if you're building out all this text in terms of what you're trying to do and passing that off to the agent, there's some time savings there as well. And then I think the last bit that I'll just mention too is, just from a discovery lens, like I think I've had countless meetings where different parts of the organization, I won't name them, will complain about different parts of the product or have feedback about it, and be brand news to me in terms of what's going on there. But you can run a lot of these different things here to really get all that feedback and understand it, and then they're happy because they're getting all that feedback directly over to you. And so, Greg, a lot of different areas here. I think what I'll just say is that it depends on what workflow is most important, to your organization and like what you're focused on. But massive amounts of savings, that can be, implemented once you focus it.
Amazing. We have 2 minutes left, so I will ask, instead of engaging with more questions, Ron, what would you like us to take away most from the conversations that we've had now that you've heard lots of questions?
Yeah, so I love all the questions, and definitely welcome that, and appreciate that means people are paying attention, so that's always a good thing. So if you take away anything, it's I probably said 7 times, so I'll say an 8th time. Context matters, and so get your context in place in terms of what you're actually doing as you start to build out that system. Make sure that you take that introspective look, to understand where is your team right now and where you're trying to achieve, where you're trying to go with it. And take that step back to start to see, it's like, all right, what do I need, to really get there in terms of upping the level of maturity, for my organization in terms of where we go. There is the easy button, in terms of that, and check out the early access program that I mentioned. That'll definitely help to save some cycles there, as you start to get this up in place, up and running. But what we will have some software on the site pretty shortly that'll allow you to not only build your own PM OS, but then also, roll it out across the team.
Wonderful. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for being so highly engaged. Ron, you've got a great topic that many of us definitely wanted to learn more from you about. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you. If you have any questions, Ron, I believe you said that people could also engage with you directly. So feel free to reach out, and I'll be following up. Ron, send me a link to the deck and I'll send it out to everybody who's registered.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone.